It's all blasphemy.
Freebird. Coming to you now quite live from Pinda Studios, a Bad Records production. I'm Sascha Saintevic, with me is Briano Hawk. Briano, did you know you can find us at saintsofblasphemy.com, as well as iTunes and SoundCloud?
And Twitter as well.
Everyone's on Twitter. And I guess Facebook, if you're into that kind of thing. Yeah, but you know.
Well, we're working on Facebook, like I said.
Take your time.
It's saintsofblasphemy.com. It's part of the
your time.
It's part of the Bad Year Records, and that's what's on Facebook. Yeah. Bad Year Records.
Okay, well, you know, you're talking about the future. I want to talk about the past. Yeah, and not just any past. I want to talk about the King, baby.
King Louis.
Yes, King Louis the 16th in particular. He has some.
Oh no! I was talking about King Louis from Tailspin.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Please enlighten us.
Yeah. He's president now, isn't he?
Yes.
Oh wait, never mind. That's a dumbass Trump.
Yeah. I can see how you make the. Now, King Louis rocked that Hawaiian shirt much better than Trump ever could.
Yeah, that's true.
Now I'm talking about the King of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. You know, we can't have a music discussion show without at any point talking about Elvis, because his name is just synonymous with music globally for a lot of people.
Elvis Eugene Presley, isn't that right?
Yeah, whether you liked him or hated him, like I don't think there are few people as recognizable in music than Elvis Presley. Like if I walk up to any random person and say, "Hey, what are you thinking of right now?" If I just say the word music, a lot of them will say
Prince.
Yes, and a lot of them, no. Elvis predates Prince. I'd put him. I think recognition-wise, he's much higher because there are people in like Bhutan who know nothing of American culture. They know Coca-Cola, they know Elvis Presley, and they probably know Michael Jordan.
Yeah. That is true.
Like those are pretty much the top three contenders of American culture exports as far as stuff that's admired about American culture.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I wanna dive into sort of Elvis, his legacy, his musicianship, and also, I mean, we're gonna have to talk about some of the controversies. And I wanna, let's start out in the beginning, just when he was starting out. He is credited as sort of being let's say, the father of this rockabilly sound that arrived. Rock and roll, people will always debate. He himself never ever claimed to be, the originator of any of the music he was doing. He always gave credit to those who came before him. And
yeah.
Surprisingly, for a white artist in the segregated times, he always gave credit to the African American influences.
Yep.
Of his sound, which didn't really happen that often. Like, even though there were other white artists that sort of did a tame, toned down version of what the black artists were doing.
Yeah, they would take black artists' songs and do the white version of it, which is less. There was
less rhythm and less blues.
Well, no, they did more. Less blues, less soul to it. They did more of the pop. Pretty much what it is. Pop before pop is what it is now.
One of the earliest controversies with Elvis was that he not just took their music. People thought he was black when like the segregated, because the music, the radio stations were also segregated. White stations played white artists, black stations, the ones that were in the South, played the jazz, blues songs.
Yeah.
When they played his earliest singles, when Sun Records put on his earliest singles out there on the black artists when he was like 18, 19 years old. People would call in complaining why they were playing a black artist. They actually had a whole interview with him at that time where he had to keep mentioning what high school he graduated from, so that people would know, sort of like Sully, he went to a white school, he's a white guy. Just because people saw it as a sort of a whole degeneration of music, because. Again, at those times, heavily racist times in the South. But that's why I give Elvis some credit, because he still gave credit to the black artists that he was clearly channeling.
Yeah.
At the time, he could have just given in and says, you know what, no, I do it so much better than they. But he didn't. He's like, no, you know what, these guys over here, B.B. King, they're all so much better than.
Oh yeah. He gave. That's the one thing with Elvis. So I think that's what got the culture to go to both sides in a sense because of the fact that he gave credit to, the black artists and, the ones where he got a lot of the music from his actual soul in a sense, his feeling of what his music was and stuff, his style. Because he's from Tennessee. Most Tennessean, people from Tennessee or whatever. And
he was playing predominantly in the South
at the time. Were country. They really do a lot of country stuff. Nothing really rock or blues and stuff like that. So it was rare for anyone to come out who was a white artist to do that style of music or something. And so that's why I think he was such a big hit at the time he was, and still today because of the fact that all the stuff he went through. Music wise and just in general his life, the rise and fall of
and we'll get
king,
to the fall. Don't worry.
Which we will cover through the whole thing. But I mean, in general, it's just
But just sticking to his career started out with a sense of controversy, and part of controversy is what fueled his name early on too. It's sort of what gave rise and interest to everything. They would because they would ban him on venues because they didn't like the way not just the way he sang, which they had issues with, they sounded too black, quote unquote, but also the way he would perform. He didn't tone down what he did. He gave the energy that came with the music. He would dance, he would gyrate, he would the sex appeal, with the sexuality of music. Now of course we're we've seen so much worse stuff on the Nickelodeon Teen Choice Awards. You see more sexual things than you'd see Elvis. But at the time, you need to understand, they didn't have that. This is when I Love Lucy, Lucy and Ricky they were married and they slept in separate beds on the show.
Yeah, when was it Lucille or Lucy was pregnant in real life and they had to cover it up. Yeah, because they couldn't show where babies actually came from.
Yeah, and I mean
all that fun stuff.
So this is as far as the society was so much more puritanical at the time. It's hard for us to really relate to it in some sense because, like I said, sex appeal is everywhere now. You turn on the Disney Channel, they're sexualizing the actors there.
Oh yeah,
and it's no big deal to us. But this was a huge deal, especially with someone like Elvis. So they would ban him from venues, but teenagers would get into their cars and they would drive just from town to town just to be able to see him. Women would swoon every time they saw him. People would just faint and throw over themselves in order to just get a glimpse of him. It was the rise of that sort of teen sexual revolution in a sense, as far as in music.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing is at the time there wasn't really that style thing. People were growing out of their
it was
their
juvenile
cookie
delinquency
cutter look. Yeah, it's this juvenile delinquency and stuff. So yeah, I mean Elvis. You can't say Elvis is the one who brought that all along, because I mean it was
the formula hit really well with him.
It hit well for him because as a white artist, he sounded black and he was controversial because he was somewhat dance.
He was sexual and high energy in his performances. Now, as far as the delinquency goes, he wasn't a juvenile delinquent in any sense, in his teenage years or anywhere else. He himself was surprised that he was being equated with that. So, Sinatra actually hated Elvis's music. When he came out, Sinatra was sort of I guess you can call him a sex symbol, in the 40s and things like that. Then Elvis came in the 50s and sort of took over that role. And Sinatra says, "Oh, this is just debauchery, degenerate. This is disgusting." And Elvis actually, a very good response to that was you know what, I respect the man, but I disagree with him.
Yeah.
Which is all it's the best way to shrug off anyone who's trying to social. You know what, I'm not even going to just wash it off my shoulder. I'm not even going to bother with that.
Yeah.
Nonsense. But so a lot of his early fame was the credit does go to the fact that he was controversial from the beginning. They knew though he'd be controversial. When he was first trying to get into music, he was told repeatedly, "You're not good." When he had more of a country sound, more of a gospel sound. Like when he was trying to go with that, he was told, "And this isn't good. This isn't interesting." He would do like ballads and then like, "This sucks." It was when the sound producers at Sun Records, they were actively trying to find a white artist that could do more of a rhythm blues sound. And it was when he was sort of like go into like just sort of like a, playing around in the record studio, like with with his buddies, like when he was sort of like channel more of that music that he listened to on the side. Yeah, they were like, well, let's try that out, let's do that. So like they actively knew this would cause controversy, and a new controversy would lead to cash.
Oh yeah,
this is, let's not like pretend that this just came out of nowhere. Of course, much like punk music was well marketed before it was even around. Before it was a money making machine. For some people, like the Sex Pistols and their manager, this, of course, also there was a marketing gimmick from it all along. Yeah,
but I mean, the thing is, you just mentioned the Sex Pistols manager, Elvis's manager, the Colonel.
And we'll get to him. You know what? He wasn't there in the first few years. But yes,
that's the thing is, Elvis did not take off until he got the manager. The Colonel. It's actually been stated multiple times through multiple
Elvis
things.
Stated that a lot.
It was but it's been stated multiple times that Elvis was very appreciative of his manager, and people who knew his manager were say he's an asshole. He's a
con man.
He is a con man, but I mean that's the thing is he did a good enough job at doing what he said he was going to do. So. How can you call him a con man in that sense that he said he was going to, do what he did, get Elvis where he was, and he did. But he did other methods and he did things, and it was. I mean, that's the one thing.
Let's explore that. Then I was gonna.
He actually did such a good job that Elvis didn't hate him. A lot of managers, their artists end up hating their manager because of whatever it is. They did something wrong. They screwed him on a deal, this and that. The Colonel actually screwed other people just to take money from Elvis.
Yeah, the thing though,
Elvis gave it to him anyways.
The thing about Elvis though is like he was notoriously not a good businessman. He would not really read contracts. The Colonel could put whatever he wanted in front of him. He was just like, okay, sure, why not? Sign it. Let's go. Let's have the performance. But he would also. Okay, I was going to save the Colonel like someone like in the Military sample, but I got to get to the Colonel now. So Elvis was already sort of gaining a name for himself in the 50s, in the mid-50s, prior to the Colonel. And then, he would go, and then he went to the military, and he was afraid, he did his military service. He kept insisting that they treat him like everybody else, even though he was already sort of semi-famous at that time. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure he got some kind of special treatment.
Yeah. He didn't go on the front line.
He did privately confess that he was scared his career would be over because people would just, within those 2 years, they would just forget about him. And in a way, he did start to fade a bit. So, but then he came back. He came back bigger. One way that he came back, like he signed a deal. He stopped working with Sun Records, signed a deal with RCA. And this is where the Colonel starts coming into the picture as his main manager. The Colonel was a man whose bottom line was always cash. So all the things that you and I have spent so many episodes complaining about in the music industry, all the way that managers and labels screw over musicians or use musicians strictly as a money-making machine, strictly as a way to make themselves famous, where the dollar is the bottom line. He is like the perfect embodiment of that, of that trend. He probably personified it. He perfected it. I'm not going to say he began it, but he perfected that to some extent. So he would make decisions for Elvis that probably in the long run kind of hurt Elvis for a while. Because there was a time period, after the 50s to the 60s when Elvis's star began to fade even within his lifetime. Part of the reason was he was signed into these shitty-ass movie contracts that sucked.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of chocolate. And he had to do, musical numbers with him. All these movies would turn like corny musicals because it's Elvis. So they took advantage of it. He hated those songs. He probably confessed, these are god-awful. Now, he gave it his all when he sang them because that's his job. But he's like, these movies stink. The songs in these movies suck. they're critically panned. Now, of course, they made money because it's Elvis.
Yeah.
Like, so he was still well liked. He still could live off the image that he got, as a teenage sex symbol. But
teenage.
well, yeah.
Yeah. I know.
But he hated this, and part of the reason is like his management team, but largely Tom Parker, who was not a colonel.
The colonel.
He was not a colonel. He was
the colonel.
He was a Dutch.
He was known as the colonel. You call him the colonel.
Okay, he was made a colonel by an unofficial Louisiana militia.
Yes, the colonel.
Okay, he was discharged from the military that he joined illegally because he wasn't a U.S. citizen. He was from the Netherlands, which he denied. He tried to say he was from West Virginia. He was a con man and a liar, and he was a connie prior to this. So let's put the full reputation of the colonel out there.
Yeah.
Okay, but he would put him in these things that he did not like, and it probably had some effect in putting Elvis on this sort of downward depression. So where he would make one bad decision after another, like personally, because Elvis was not a happy man for like the last half of his life.
Oh yeah,
he was a very unhappy man. Now his popularity began to sink again because these movies he didn't like. There was a 7-8 year period in which he didn't record any albums at all. He didn't put out anything because he was just doing these crappy movies, and which he disliked, but he was contractually obligated to do them now. On his comeback, he would in the late 60s, there was this whole comeback which was relatively popular, but you could already see that he was a different man. And part of the
you can tell he was a different man.
We'll get to that too. We'll get to the change, the expanded how he went from being the lean
expanded, yes.
How he went from being the slick, lean sex machine to being, different. Let's put it that way. So he
certainly did expand.
Okay, well, during his comeback tour, the Colonel did also screw him in some ways because he would demand from these venues, he would demand money in a way that, by today's standards, would be ludicrous.
Yes.
The amount of money he demanded it for himself, for Elvis, and then the portion he would take from Elvis. Everything else, it's clearly, and it goes without saying that obviously I really don't think Elvis paid any attention to where the money was going, how the money was going, and he knew that, and he took advantage of that. So
but the thing is, the Colonel told him, "This is what you're going to do," and he did it. So I mean, that's like I said. I'm not backing the fact that he did what he did. It's just the fact that he did stick to what he said he was going to do, and that's my whole thing. If there's going to be a manager who's going to say, "Oh, this is what I'm going to do for you," and then they just completely go, different direction, you're not doing what you said, and you're screwing the artist over, and, you're backstabbing and all that other stuff. He stole money from him in a sense, took outrageous, amounts of funds that should have gone to Elvis, but didn't, but still he kind of, worked what he could because he knew he was working with an idiot in finances and business, but a genius in music, because Elvis was known for his music.
Yeah, and,
Blue Hawaii, which is some of the one of the movies that bombed like crazy or whatever, but the best parts of the movie is when he's singing. It may be a crap movie, but you hear him sing and you hear his voice, and that's what it was Elvis. Well, that's what he's known for. I mean, not many people know he was a 5th degree black belt in Taekwondo.
Karate.
Taekwondo, actually.
Oh, karate too.
Maybe karate as well. I know his Taekwondo. He has some funky photos with his
he took a guy down
stuff
on stage one time.
Yeah,
these 4 fans started rushing towards him, and he thought he was being attacked. The bodyguards went in there, but the first one he actually managed to do a karate move and chop him down.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing. Well, he's literally a third degree. I just like But anyways, I mean there's photos of him. You can see him like in sequins Elvis attire, long whatevers, and he's doing this stance, which is hilarious because everyone knows it's the Elvis stance, which is actually just a modified double knife hand kind of back stance type thing, but with the it's Elvis. That's what you knew. It's like, oh yeah. So that's the thing is not a lot of people know. It's like, oh well, he was a martial artist. He trained in this. He did whatever. It's like, oh, he's a singer. He got fat. He got skinny. He got whatever. He was attractive, and then not so much. And he died on a toilet. You know, it's like, yes, but there's
Don't
so
spoil it.
many different things.
Spoiler alert.
There's so many different things that actually go into that. You know what I mean?
Well, let's just. Well, then let's.
I went a little ghetto on that one. You know, sorry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The thing though, well, let's take a few moments and talk about his musicianship. Like, let's put all the controversy aside. Like, just Elvis as a singer. Elvis was versatile.
Not Elvis, but Elvis.
Okay, Elvis.
I'm
Whatever. He was very versatile in his sound.
Yes.
And part of, like, from the very beginning, and that's part of, like, he would mix and he would go into these different genres. Like, he recorded pretty much gospel music his whole life and country music, you know, and then of course the rockabilly, rock and roll that made him famous. There was, you know, of course his blues that goes in there, and he actually did have a melodic voice.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't a bad singer. Like, a lot of people, like, around that time, you know, you hear them, you're like, I could see, like, the image wise why they got famous, but he could actually.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing is most people, when you think of Elvis, you're not thinking of his melodic thing. You're thinking of like the first thing you hear is, "You ain't nothing but a hound dog." It was like he's throwing it out there, you know. It was like, oh hell, but then you listen to like I said, that Blue Hawaii or whatever,
songs.
where he's actually doing his softer songs, or even the the one song that it's been covered, you know, by tons of people, even him, which is that, you know, why men say only fools love you. You can actually hear that melodic voice, you know. I can't do. I mean, that's probably the best Elvis impression I could ever do. You know, hey, pretty mama.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. But you know, I mean, you can hear that melodic voice. He did have a very melodic voice. You know, he had a good vocal range.
So his at least his reputation just as a musician. At least I know, like in the later years, of course, because of all the drug use and everything, you know, it sort of went down the toilet. But it was well, yeah, no pun intended. It was well earned, the reputation he had as a musician, because he was a decent singer.
Yes,
he was good at what he did. Like, he wasn't like the best guitar player or anything like that. No one's claiming that. He didn't do anything like over. I don't think there was like one little thing that he was the best at. He wasn't the best dancer, the best. You know, like, he didn't hold the tune the best. But it's like all the little things that came together that made him recognizable, that made him interesting, that made him profitable to himself, but that made him talented.
I mean, there's not really many artists that can get, you know, big hits off of singing about shoes. So, yeah, come on.
Blue suede shoes, nonetheless.
Or a hound dog. So,
Yeah,
I mean, that goes into just his musicianship alone. Great storytelling in a sense, because he's telling a thing
well,
about
both of those
shoes.
were covers, though.
But it's still,
so
it's great storytelling from the fact that he's talking about shoes or a dog that's crying all the time, but there's meaning behind it. His it's carried through his voice, which makes it more going from there. A lot of his songs were covers. I mean, hell, he tried to cover a Dolly Parton song, but being that Dolly Parton didn't want to sell it to him, he didn't do it.
Yeah, but also Elvis came around in time. This is like when the baby boomers, so all the kids born like after World War II, and there was a lot of them, were entering the teenage years, the pre-teens and teenagers. So he sort of like he appealed to them, like and that, I think, freaked out the older generation. And that's a lot of times why they try to even tame him down. Like, so he would appear on TV and like we can't have you, and like we have to shoot you from the waist up, like because that means something. There was one time, I forgot which state it was. I think maybe a Florida court said like he's not allowed to move, so he didn't. But he moved his little pinky throughout the performance as a sort of a joke gesture. Yeah. So he kept his legs still, but he was just sort of wave his pinky around throughout as he was holding the mic.
Yeah,
just sort of like as a sort of as a snub to them.
Yeah.
Because once you get away with but I don't think they would have gotten to that point if his music wasn't appealing.
Or inspirational. Or
whatever, because the first people didn't see him on TV originally. People just heard his voice, and then when he got on TV, that made him, that blew him up even more. But originally, it wasn't his voice that got him out there, and his style of singing.
Yeah,
which now, of course. Then let's get into it. the dark side of the king, the descent. So part of it was his fame started to fall, and he became more dependent on drug use, prescription drug use. He had this weird sort of way to justify. He publicly detested drugs. He didn't even drink that. He rarely drank because he claimed alcoholism was in his family. So he didn't even like people who would use marijuana. He would like you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't be doing that. He could. He apparently in like he talked down about the Beatles because they were heavily into LSD and drug use. And that he's like that's disgusting. You should never do that to yourself. But he justified his drug use because there's no minor prescription. The drug. I'm not a drug addict. I'm getting this legitimately from a doctor. Even though everybody around him could clearly see he was getting high. He was abusing these drugs. So it's just a weird way he justified them to himself. And the more he used, the worse his music got. And the worse his music got, the further he fell, the more he used. And it just sort of culminated into this weird thing in downward spiral. So he's like a perfect example of an artist that sort of like access that's sort of the self-destructive behavior that we talked about in one of our earliest episodes. He's like a good embodiment of that, of somebody who just, especially like as an artist begins to age and as his music, in the 60s and the 70s, his music is sort of the past at that point. He's already a decade past his prime. People were moving on to other things. The hippie movement was coming around. It wasn't any longer about rockabilly. It was about the things that were emerging at that time. He didn't appeal to that youth like he did to the youth the decade prior. So he wasn't any longer that revolutionary sex symbol, especially, both symbolically and also physically. His body was, again, probably because of drug use, his body was, I don't want to say.
And all the sandwiches he was eating.
Yeah, I don't want to, his metabolism slowed, I'm sure.
Was it peanut butter, jelly, banana, bacon?
Oh, man, so like that. The thing then was like 3,000 calories or something like that. Or 30,000 calories or something in one sandwich. Yeah, so I'm like, he was physically deteriorating. He was his talent was deteriorating. And I think he was probably also, psychologically deteriorating at that point too. He would probably fall the bill, like in the last 10 years, as somebody who was clearly manically depressed. Just by all his behavior,
which is funny. I mean, if you think about it, all the topics we have covered up to now pretty much cover Elvis.
And that's the thing. He is, and that's why I said he's such a good symbol of music. Yes. Like the embodiment of music, like modern music. Yeah. Like the rise over the youth culture appeal, the hiccup in the career, the slump, the comeback, because he had that huge ass comeback. Elvis live from Hawaii. That was like his big ass comeback when he started coming back, and it's like he started topping the charts again. Like, is this gonna be it? Is he gonna clean himself up? And then 2-3 years after that, he was deteriorating even more. In his personal life, his marriage was falling apart. He couldn't. Again, he was becoming way too dependent on the pills. He was probably also, not probably, I know, when he was having a hard time booking, partially because of the Colonel. Yeah. Demanding outrageous sums. In that way, that was screaming. He was demanding outrageous sums for an artist that was past his prime. Yeah. At that time. He was no longer, his name was still big. He was not that big, big as he was. He was not as much of a draw any longer. Now, of course, in certain areas, he would be. So, somewhere like Vegas, he's still, to this day, there's such a huge Elvis culture there. I mean, how many impersonators are walking to the streets of Vegas at the moment?
They're not impersonators.
It's really him.
No. They're not impersonators. They're just reminding him of his family that he's actually dead.
He just did a Cleveland show reference. Everybody's gonna hate you. You and all 16 of us that saw that episode.
It was funny.
So I mean, as far as Elvis's legacy, do you think it's fair? Because there are two ways. Some people say he is the king of rock and roll. He is the embodiment of good musicianship, of a good talented musician. Others will say focus on the decline, the last decade of his life.
mean,
So they'll either focus the first decade or the last decade. He is the drug addict. You know, he's the one that burned the candle on both ends and then burned himself out through his, you know, like self-destructive behavior. Do you think either one of those is really like deserved to focus on that? Like as far as just when you evaluate his legacy and contribution to music?
I mean, Elvis is literally two different people. You know, it really is. The rise, you know, Elvis that everyone knew, you know, the hip shaker, the rebel.
Skinny Elvis and fat Elvis.
Yeah, pretty much that's what it is. I mean, skinny Elvis, who's, you know, sex symbol, and, you know, that he caused so much trouble with TV and, you know, women swooning here left and right and, you know, panties getting thrown on the stage or whatever the hell, all this different stuff, just like what the Beatles did and stuff, you know? And then you have the fall to where Elvis wasn't really around. You didn't really hear about him in the spotlight. He reemerges. He's some plump guy who's a drug addict and sweating like a, you know, freaking pig because he, you know, is fat as one. And so it's just, it's, you know, it's hard to say. It's like, oh, well, focus on this one, you know, talk about all how great he was. And then, oh, look how sad he looked. It's hard not to focus on one or the other instead of the whole, you know? Because there's always the whole rebuttal is like, oh, yeah, Elvis is a great artist. Yeah, but he's also a fat pig.
Well, I mean, being a fat pig, that's nothing with you being a great artist.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with it. He was, like, when he reemerged, and he was a lot bigger than what everyone expected, he did trim down again. He didn't get back to what he used to be. But then again, he was a lot older.
Yeah, he's in his late 30s.
It's not going to be like, oh, he's going to get back to the,
he's not going to be 19.
Really slim figure, you know, sex symbol from a, you know, overweight guy who's kind of, you know, down on his luck in a sense. No, he's not going to get back to that. But he did get, you know, when he did come back, he was doing, you know, a lot of stuff. He did use that name, Elvis. He was getting up there. He's getting stuff. Yes, the Colonel, you know, didn't have a lot of shows for him for, you know, stuff because of the outrageous terms and stuff. But that's
also
just because he was like, this is what we're going to do. You're Elvis. You shouldn't have to do these petty shows. You shouldn't have to do, you know, this stuff and getting paid peanuts. You're going to get paid peanuts with the bigger shows that I'm getting you.
Yeah.
You know?
Also, there's also like a whole different show. Even just within his lifetime, there's 2 decades that he was like big. So, you know, like he died in his early 40s. He became big in his, you know, like 20, he was already big. But let's say early 20s when he was like a huge megastar throughout America and globally. And he died in his early 40s. So 2 decades of like a full-rounded career with ups and downs.
Yeah.
So the sort of the image he had at the beginning. So like what was considered controversial sex appeal or display of sexuality had already shifted by the late 60s. Like it wasn't any longer. Now, first of all, he's not within the demographic any longer. He's not 19, 20 years old. So he, you know, 14, 15-year-old girls aren't going to swoon for him when he's in his mid to late 30s. Like not that way, not the way they did, because he's like the father at this point, and he looked it. Like it's not like he looked like he was still a young man. He wasn't a young man anymore. So, but even then, like his performances, you know, like where it used to be, you know, like he would have like the what was it, the 50s, and like that rugged display of masculinity, and like plain shirt and like slacks. It became like just a jacket on. He became so much more grandiose in his performance. So he had like suddenly he had like the eyeliner and the glitter and like the tassels, like with like the eagle on the back.
The typical Elvis.
It became so flamboyant to us, and which was totally different than he was like in his early times. So it felt like, in a way, he was like, in order to make up for the fact that it wasn't what like it was. He couldn't be the Elvis he was 20 years ago. He sort of went over the top with it. Like he was compensating for that in a way. And which is a shame, because if you listen to, like when he first had a comeback in the late 60s, if you just listen to the sound, his voice is as good as it was. Like, and I think he had cleaned up his act for that brief period. There was at least a 2 to 3 year gap in which he had to, you know, clean up his act a little bit. Now I know he was still dependent on drugs. I know all of that. But he seemed to have taken it more seriously at that point. or focused more on his music at that point. He wasn't doing those shitty ass movies, and he wasn't focusing on sort of stuff. I think he sort of saw it like, this is it. This is gonna make me or break me. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna give it my all. I'm gonna see what happens.
Yeah.
And you can see like so, but he still. I think he sort of felt less comfortable in the world that he was, and part of it was he was being forgotten. His name was so recognizable, but the young people that control the music industry, and let's face it, youth culture controls even from the 50s on. Youth culture is what controls music, which is like when we talk about like how quickly glam died for Nirvana, and like when the grunge came in, like youth culture sounds like to hell with this. And guess what? The same thing happened in the 50s when why Frank Sinatra was so pissed off. They're like, okay, old blue eyes, we're gonna listen to Elvis.
Yeah,
like
you went from the Rat Pack to Elvis.
We can dance to Elvis. You can talk about it. Like L is can mean whatever the hell you want it to. Yeah. I mean, to you, I want some rhythm and blues.
Yeah.
But the same thing happened in the 60s when people were like, okay, Elvis, that's Jailhouse Rock is nice and all, but you know what? I think we're gonna go with some Dylan aways.
Yeah,
so see how that goes. Like we're gonna go with like, hey, John Lennon and Paul McCartney are doing some things. We hear the Beatles are coming out with things that are a little bit more trendy with us. So he wasn't any longer the star that he was, and I think he felt it. So the music content didn't matter any longer, but he knew that it was all visually so appealing, so he was sort of compensating it with these grandiose performances, which I think didn't do him any favor as far as like his legacy goes. Just my personal opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's
I think they went into the whole downward trend that made him that made him a joke.
Yeah.
Towards the end. He became a sort of a stereotype of himself.
Yeah.
A cliche.
But I mean that's the thing is, I mean, he had the rise and the fall. I mean, he had his fame, and then as we've spoke through other podcasts and stuff, that you eventually hit your peak and you have to go down. You can't end up on the top. That happens with everybody. You can try to end at the top, but you're going to be dropping somewhere.
The only way to stay on the top throughout your entire career is like you die before you hit 30.
Yeah.
But that's like the only way that can happen.
Like Elvis, he hit the top and he had his fall. And
he didn't have a long life. He died relatively youngish.
Yeah, he did.
He was in his 40s.
But I mean, he hit the top. He had his fall.
But as far as
he had a rise again, and then it was kind of didn't go as high as where expected because of the name synonymous. Elvis. Mm-hmm. You think, he king of rock. That's what he is. Just like Michael, king of pop. And it's like, yeah, but they both had the same type of thing, rise and fall, and into kind of nothingness.
Yeah, and then after you die, suddenly everybody is like sings your praises. Like, and, I mean, I don't want to rehash that. We did a really
I mean, that's the thing. You fade into nothingness until you die, and then everyone's like, oh my god.
Then they remember how great.
Yeah, how long ago is it? What you heard? Their song or whatever it is, and you bought their album, thought about them. It's like, oh, I wonder what they're doing. No, it's like, I want to listen to the new people, the Stones, or whatever. Just like now, Rolling Stones. What the hell are they doing? When
Mick Jagger and Keith Richards die, they will.
When one of the two die or something, there's going to be it's great loss into the rock and roll community. This and that. And it's like, yes, they did great music. They have their thing. There's a whole podcast we can do about them. But
at some point we probably will.
Yeah, but it's like, what have they done recently? I mean, Mick Jagger put out an album, I think. It's sometime.
And here's the thing that
it's been kind of,
Like now, and this is also Elvis's trend. House was a little bit different. He was when he did his comebacks, he was putting out original content. He was trying his best to give new things out there, not rely on his old songs. So he wasn't performing like Jailhouse Rock in his late 30s, towards the end of his life. But a lot of times when you become an older musician, like when you're already like 50, 60, pushing 70, I mean, you're going to give the crowd what they want. The crowd that's still your fan base, they want to hear the stuff that they remember from their youth. It's a nostalgia trip at that point. So a lot of them, like you'll tour and you'll perform the songs that made you big. Like maybe you'll do collaborations here and there, but you're not going to be too concerned with like, no, I need to stay ahead of the times. Like I'm going to I'm going to define the next generation of music when I'm 72. I mean, it's really not going to, and even if you did come up with something so amazing, it's not going to be bought by the young people because they can't relate to you. And I know that sounds really harsh, but that's just how it works a lot of times. Like, there is a relatable point. So, like I keep saying, like, well, why is it that Elvis, went so big in the 50s when he came on when he was a 20-year-old young man? Well, because he was a 20-year-old young man. He looked like the audience that was predominantly buying his albums.
Yeah.
Like, and the reason why, like, why is it that Elvis could have put out this music, and like that he admittedly said like all these black artists were doing already, like, for years? Well, because the predominantly teenage white people, about now one, they may not have been exposed to it before. Number two, he looks like them, and in a segregated community environment, especially, it was much more socially acceptable for them to listen to him, even though like the older people may have snubbed it and may not have liked it, may have like protested it. It doesn't matter to them. Yeah, they're like, it's acceptable. He looks like me, and you know what? I like it, and that's how it's gonna go. So that's why I'm like, it's once you already passed your prime in that way, music. And I know people will hate the fact that it is. And I'm not that young, so don't. I'm not trying to put myself up on a pedestal. Music is a young man's game, or a young woman's game, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. It's a young person's game. Yes.
The youth will always define what is the next revolutionary bit of music. It's just how it is. Like, we old timers, we old timers. We will be eventually. We're not that far from it. Like as
I don't know about you, but I'm never getting old.
Yeah.
Oh, my back.
My head is gonna get frozen. It's just gonna live forever.
Yeah.
Like Walt Disney.
Futurama reference. Hey, look at that.
I'm just gonna wait for there are places where they're waiting. People freeze themselves in these giant ass refrigerators, waiting for the technology to come around. That's gonna give them immortal life. It's the stupidest. It's like believing you're gonna get a cow from a hamburger or something. Like, dude, you're dead.
Yeah.
And like, you're dead, and like, just accept and embrace it.
Yeah.
Okay, but I want to dedicate a little bit of time. I think we went about his legacy, and we talked about my issues with freaking Tom Parker, the Colonel. We need to address the biggest piece of controversy in modern time that comes up with Elvis a lot of times. What, are you going to say something, or do you want me to say it?
Go ahead.
And we touched on it in that I consider the biggest piece of controversy that needs to be addressed. We talked about how he gave credit to the black artists when most white musicians didn't in the segregated South. There's still this mantra that goes around: Elvis stole from the black man. He stole the black man's music. And this idea that he's racist, so there's this quote that's always thrown around where he's supposed to say like the only thing that a black man is good for is buying. Well, the only thing a Negro is good for is buying his records and shining his shoes. It was in the mid '50s when that came out. He was already famous. From the moment it hit the airwaves, that's what he said. He absolutely denied that he ever said that. The writers from Jet magazine, predominantly African-American magazine, went to investigate it, interviewed him. No one has been able to find a single credible source for that. Yeah. Anyway, now let me remind you, it's 1957 when he's adamantly denying that he said that. And within that same interview with the Jet writer, first of all, he's giving an interview to Jet. Second of all, in that interview, he's claiming to the wider American audience, no, I am actually very appreciative of black musicians, of the music that influenced me, and I know that they did this first, but long before I did.
Yeah.
This is a time when, in the 60s, a decade later, someone like John Wayne openly proclaimed himself as a white supremacist with absolutely no detriment to his career. So that's why I think that when people say, if you want to talk about the greater structure, that it was unfair that Elvis could make it big with this kind of a sound, while ethnic musicians weren't able to go as far simply because of the racist society, that's one thing. To personally blame Elvis Presley for that, I think you're not doing any favors to yourself, because as a person, like, whatever, all the criticisms you can put on Elvis, and you can put criticisms on Elvis as far as like his personal life, his behavior, his disastrous business sense, like, racism isn't one of them. Like, I see no evidence that he was in any way sort of stuck in that mindset that many people in his generation were. So like that, it's just, I feel like that's like one thing we just need to address, because it comes up. I hear it come up, and like other people talk about music. When they talk about Elvis, they'll say like, well, you know what, he exploited and stole their music, even though he was always showed a lot of difference to it.
Well, he did that to the white man.
He stole country music. So I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know if you want to add on to that charge in and of itself. I mean, I know you. No. I doubt you personally think that there's a racist woman in this body.
For someone coming up in a very racist time,
but you could openly be racist,
and openly be racist, and to do what at the time was called black music, and stand by it. It would be very hard to believe that same person would make a racist comment like that. You know, that the black man's only good for buying his albums and shining his shoes. It's very hard to believe that he would even say that. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, being interviewed for a black magazine, you know, it's kind of, you know, ludicrous to say, oh yeah, he said that, you know, that he's a racist bastard. It's like, not really. I mean, there's way more evidence of him saying,
pretty progressive,
saying, hey, you know, thank you to these artists, these black artists that gave me my sound,
and thereby possibly exposing those artists to his audience.
Yeah, you know, going to Baptist churches and stuff like that. Like actually, not just showing up like, oh, Melvin, hey, y'all. No, actually participating in being in the churches, things like that.
The thing that's
it's a very southern community what he comes from, which is, you know, that's just what he did. That's how he came across, you know. The
thing that's on regards to that was actually in the early years was very big in the black community.
Yeah,
like people really like he was a big hit, and then that quote came out of nowhere, and I feel like part of it is like it was probably manufactured in a way. Somebody somewhere said it in order to undermine his influence, or to make him appear like he's just like all of us are, you know, like in a way, you know, in our racist ways. So like that's one thing. Like
so I mean, that's it. I don't know, but it's but at the same time, it's quite stupid that that's a whole.
So
thing
I feel like
I
just feel like you need to, if you're going to criticize someone, do legit criticism. Now, if you want to criticize his hypocrisy as far as going on against youth culture in the 60s and the 70s on the, you know, condemning their drug use, condemning, you know, like the hippie movement for that, while being a talking, walking pharmacy on the side, and like not being able to stand up, not being able, you know, like to even perform at times on account of he was such a rampant drug addict on dependent on prescription pills. Yeah, that's something to criticize him on. Yeah, that is a totally legit thing to bring up if you want to talk about him as a person. If you want to talk about him as a performer, you can bring that up too. Because, you know, especially towards the end, he was doing what Sinatra did to him. He was talking crap about all these other musicians that at the time got more airplay than him, that were more popular than him, that he felt like were threatening to him.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. It happens to most artists. You know, they're going to, you know, feel threatened because they're not in the spotlight, and they go after, you know, something like a Napster, because, you know, stupid ass Metallica has to go after things because, you know.
I was waiting to see how you're going to bring Metallica into this. You brought Trump into this at the beginning somehow by virtue of Baloo and King Louie in Talesford. I was waiting to see how you're going to bring Metallica into this conversation.
Yeah, you knew I was going to do it. You know, because Metallica are dumbasses, and they you know, need to stop existing on this musical earth.
The earth is musical?
Well, I'm not saying they need to die. I'm just, you know, they need to just like stop existing as Metallica. You know, they all need to go into
retire
into oblivion, and, you know, just not ever be mentioned again. But, you know, I'm going to keep mention them until, you know, everyone knows that Metallica sucks, because, you know, they suck as much as Trump.
Hey, you got to tune this. So people who are listening to the Saints of Blasphemy drinking game,
Yeah.
both Trump and Metallica were mentioned. So take your shot.
Yeah.
I think Elvis's name is pretty much secured in the history of music. He's like one of those people you can't talk about. I always mention like there's a handful of artists that if you talk about music in the 20th century, you can't not mention them. Elvis is one of those people.
Yeah,
like he was a milestone in many ways. He's a warning to future musicians in a lot of ways too.
Yeah,
he's a horror story. It is like all the things that can go wrong, business wise, personal in your personal life.
Yeah,
but he's also he's an image in some ways. He's not even a person any longer. Elvis, the name, is a legend.
Yes, it
even
is.
within his own lifetime before he died. Like it's just.
Yeah. I mean, that's like I said. Pretty much all the podcasts we've done up to this point have kind of pointed to what Elvis
although we didn't explicitly talk about it. Yeah, because we're an alternative.
In a way, through it all.
You and I, we're of the alternative background, like 90s alternative music in a way shaped us.
Oh yeah.
Like so, we can, and when I say alternative, I'm including punk music that preceded it. I'm including rock music on there, but I feel like 90s alternative is really like sort of a mishmash of all of that together, where a unique style arose that was influenced by all those. So that's why I give credit to all those influences, but I'm just giving, telling people where I come from in that regard.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can appreciate, I can look back and listen to Jailhouse Rock, and I can appreciate it for what it is. I can see the beginnings of where we're going in the 60s, the 70s, skip over the 80s, and get to the 90s. like you sort of, like I said, like you see this sort of youth culture rebellion, and you see an industry emerging that was still in its infancy, the music industry, as a viable business for an artist to become famous, become rich, make a living off of this, as well as all the things that surround it, the labels and everything else. And you see, like we always say, like the best way, what was it we said in the previous show? The best way you get to control what kind of music is out there is with your cash. Like, people forget that. They say, like, why is all this crap music out there? It's because people are buying it.
Yep.
And if people don't want to buy it, it doesn't make a difference how much society wants to resist it. If people are buying it and they want to listen to it, it's going to happen. So mainstream American society didn't want to play Elvis. They didn't like Elvis in the early days. He sounded too black to them. It didn't make a difference because youth culture, the main buyer, consumer of all music will always be youth culture.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many old people there are around. It will always be youth culture because there is no regard for tomorrow. You will spend as much money as you have, all the allowances, whatever, all your part-time jobs. So all of a sudden, they're all spending money on that. Elvis is going to hit big. You can resist all you want. You can try to ban him. He's going to hit big. Same thing. It doesn't matter how much the record labels wants to push glam music on a shitty-ass hair metal music. Grunge hits, alternative music hits. The youth culture says, nope, that's out, Grandpa. This is a new thing. They have to recalibrate. They have to refocus. Suddenly they got to back it, or they're going to lose money. It doesn't matter how much the music industry resists Napster and a new way of making music, streaming music, on-demand music, singles instead of albums, spending pennies as opposed to dollars on getting the tracks that you like. They can resist it. They can fight it, try to stop it out. The technology is there. All of a sudden, you got to recalibrate. You got to find a way to make money off of this. And they did. They found a way to make money off of this technology.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Because it's already out there. So, same thing. Once it hits, once it ignites that spark, boom, there's not much you can do about it. Boom goes the dynamite.
Oh yeah.
And that's what and that's the one when I think of someone like Elvis, and I'm talking about Elvis not as a person, Elvis as their image in music. That's sort of like I can recognize that no matter what genre of music I like, and I can appreciate that just from a historical point of view.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's the thing with just talking about Elvis in general. You can use it as a historical
time. He transcends music in that way. He's a part of history.
Yeah, because I mean the same thing as you could say about like Michael Jackson and tons of other artists.
Michael Jackson, Prince,
Yeah.
Like, and I'll put it.
And the funny thing is, I mean, they say that about like Kurt Cobain, things like that too. He wasn't around very long. In the music, like famous, like in this industry, doing all their stuff. Kurt was only there for what? It's 6 years, 5 years. Something like that, 94 he died, and still to this day, people are like, oh, well, Kurt Cobain, this and that, whatever.
With millennials, you got pre-Nirvana, you got post-Nirvana.
Yeah,
do you remember Nirvana or not?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's the thing is, and it's Elvis has been way the hell even further back, and still to this day.
It's a similar trend.
He's being talked about for either being made fun of because he died on a toilet, or being praised for bringing the style of music that he did.
Yeah, revolutionizing the music industry. But I think both points are fair if you want to raise them. It's just that you just look at it, look at the big picture of it. Is the only thing I say. Like if you want, you can discuss either one. You can discuss skinny Elvis or fat Elvis. Just doesn't bother me. Of the trendy Elvis and the has-been Elvis.
Yeah.
And you can do the same thing with any musician, but just recognize that this sound was important in developing the music. Like Elvis was important in developing the music.
Oh yeah.
Just like Nirvana was important in the developing the music. Like at least in the 90s, as well as killing off. I mean important in the sense of changing the trend that we were on.
Yeah.
It could have been somebody else. It could have been somebody else instead of Elvis come along. Someone else other than Nirvana could have come along. I'm not saying like it's deterministically stuck on these, but they were the ones that were there.
Yeah, but even today, like there's artists out there who are gonna, that kind of do the same thing. Yeah. They're changing, transcending the music genre, are gonna be known, down the line, things like that.
And
they haven't come yet. Imagine. There's whatever, yeah. So I mean, that's that like dubstep. When you hear dubstep, someone talks about the first thing that most people is like, oh, Skrillex. It's like, yeah, because he's the one who's most out there. There's other artists, who do dubstep, but Skrillex is probably the one that I hear the most when that's mentioned. So that's one of those those artists.
He's identifiable.
He's identifiable.
You become identifiable with the genre.
Yeah. So that's the thing is, I mean, there's Elvis was his thing, Michael Jackson 5, because he was so good at what he did. He's going to
Thriller was really like his.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing is he's going to go on. Bowie, Cobain, so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, there's artists out there who get that personification, and that's just what's going to happen. It's going to go on for millennia. Yeah, and whatever.
It's hard to, even if there is something like that in the works right now, it's hard to see it when you're in the middle of it. Like you look back on it a few years, like, oh, so this is what happened. Yeah, and you look back a decade later, whatever, even 5 years later, you're like, oh, this is a change. This is what happened. And and even genres that we don't really care about. When the 90s, 90s pop, one of our most popular episodes when we discussed when the boy band craze came around.
Oh yeah,
it was a change. Look, I wasn't a fan of it, but it was a change in the industry. It was a trend, and when it fizzled out, again, that's another change in that same industry, in the same thing. So that's you can look at this stuff from an isolated point of view, like all in their own little bubble.
Oh yeah.
But I think it does. You do a much better job if you look at it from a wider point of view. See how all these things sort of work together and how all these trends interconnect and the influence that they have on the music. And the influences you can't always tell right away. Sometimes it takes time.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm interested to see what happens in the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't take long. Nowadays, you can get your music out there as quickly as possible.
That is so true.
Like the man's been cut. Thank you, Napster. Metallica sucks.
Exactly.
We'll sign off with that. You guys have a good day.
All right, you guys. See you.